Hello everyone, welcome to a CSGO video breakdown. Today we're going to be talking about a look ahead here for the PGL Major Antwerp Challenger stage for the, of course, 2022 PGL Major. Quick little kind of talk about before we get started. Here with the CSGO Majors, again, if you guys are coming from other games or something, don't quite understand fully. These majors are the pinnacle of events for CSGO. These are the big events that people, grind and play for. The ultimate goal, I think, is to become major champions. So we've seen that a lot with, every roster that or every player talking, that's the goal, to become major champions. So this is the big tournament. This is what people are playing for. So something to keep in mind, that there are no motivation questions anymore here. There's no outstanding things to talk about. This is what people are playing for. So keep that in mind, that this is where people are going to pull everything out that they can to win. And we can go ahead and get started. So the format is a little bit convoluted, so keep in mind, as I explain here, kind of how these things work. That way we can know what to expect and kind of have an idea of what we're talking about before we get started. So there currently are 24 teams that can win the major. 16 of them are here in the challenger stage. 8 of them are up in the legends stage already, waiting for the next 8 teams to join them. All the qualifiers are done already, and we have these final 24. So the first 16 teams here, which are the 16 that we will be talking about a little bit later on, they play kind of a round robin or a Swiss system format. As you guys can see at the top, it's kind of worded a little bit better, but they're pretty much you pretty much play your opponent who has the same record as you all the time. The first matchups are already determined. Their odds are out for them and everything already. So we will keep that in mind when we talk about them. So these teams, but pretty much you play an opponent who has the same record as you until you either go to 3 wins or 3 losses. And that's pretty much all it is if you get to 3 wins, you qualify. If you get to 3 losses, you are out. And you play similar record teams up until you get to that point. Sorry, my voice is a little bad already. I've not been recording or anything lately, so I do apologize for that in advance. But we go ahead and keep it going here. So we already know the first matchups, so we will keep that in mind. Teams with the same records playing each other. We can go ahead and get started. I'm going to kind of make a little bit of a tier list here. This is just kind of how I expect these groups and stuff to go. It says logo tier list, but obviously we're going to be talking about skill and capacity to win and that kind of stuff. We're not here to rank logos. These are the 8 teams this is the only tier list I could find really, but that has the full up-to-date logos and all that stuff. These are just the teams that are already in the next stage. We don't need to talk about them quite yet. So we can go ahead and get started. Up in the S tier, teams that I'm looking at to probably come out on top, maybe get the 3-0 record. If you guys are doing like in-game CSGO predictions, these are probably the teams that I'd be looking forward to, honestly. I think most likely I'd go with G2 and ENCE. Those are the 2 that kind of stand out to me at the moment. I think there are other possibilities. I think some people are looking at people like Outsiders. I'm personally not seeing that quite yet. I think Outsiders can be a pretty hit or miss team, but we'll talk about them when we get there. I would say for now, those are probably the 2 teams I would have up in the S tier. Those are the teams I feel confident in their skill level and, all that. They're just the ones I feel confident in at the moment. They've been playing pretty well. They've looked really strong. I think there's a lot of positives and a lot of things to like about these 2 teams. And those are the ones I'd put up there at the S tier. I don't think I'm going to have any other teams joining them in the S tier, honestly. I feel like there's going to be a lot of teams that make it through. I think that, again, we do have 8 qualifying teams out of these teams. We're going to have some teams that I think there's going to be some in between, but I think realistically probably have 4 tiers here. I could probably delete this 4th one. maybe. Nope, I'm not sure. Whatever. So we'll have probably 4 tiers here. I think these are probably the 2 best teams. They're my quote-unquote locks to get through. I think they will qualify. I'd be surprised if either of these teams don't. But these are my top 2 teams. I think it'd be easier to start out just by getting some of the lower-end teams out of the way. So we could go with 9Z. Or I guess we could kind of go team by team, explain why. We'll look at rosters and stuff. So G2 Esports... I like the breakdown that we have here with on the Liquipedia Net website. So G2, they're the same roster that they've been running with, the Jax, Hunter, Nico, Monasi, and Alexi B. I like this team a lot. I think they're probably a top 3, top 5 team. They're somebody that's possible to win this tournament, I believe. The whole thing, it kind of just depends on how Monasi improves or how he shows up. I do think Alexi B is a quality in-game leader enough to... the extent where I think they can win the tournament. We know players like Hunter and Nico are extremely high-level players individually. We know that they player like Jax can fill his role really well as well. I think everyone else except for Monasi is kind of locked in, and we know what to expect from them in this certain extent. The volatility lies with Monasi. Again, he is extremely young. I think he's 17, maybe 16 or 17. He's only 16 still. Born in 2005. May 1, 2005. I guess that would make him 17, right? I am recording this on May 5th. So yeah, he's 17 now. That's weird that doesn't auto-update. But Monasi is 16, just turned 17. He is an extremely talented player. There's nobody doubting that. It just depends on if things like the big lights, the big expectations, all that stuff is going to get to him or not. We don't know that much. I feel like he has not played in that big of events yet. I wish he had a little bit more experience before coming here, but that's kind of the way the cookie crumbles here. I still expect him to be fine. I just don't know. That's just going to be the depending factor. If Monasi grows before our eyes and he is an extremely strong player, I think they do have the upside to win the tournament. But I'd probably have them around like the top 5 team. And considering they're playing like they're not playing those top teams yet. I think they're in a really good position to get this group stage started off well. The other team that I have up in the top tier is ENTS. Pretty much they've just been playing extremely well. I think a lot of the similar things that I've said before apply here. We have some veteran leadership with Snappy. He's a pretty hit or miss individual player, but been looking pretty strong, and there's not much to say. I think this team has just been looking really strong individually. I think players like Spinks, Ihc, Hades, and Madden have all been performing decently, kind of up and down individually. It just depends on what we're going to see. I think there's we have like a lot of ups and a lot of downs here. It just depends. Like if we get a lot of these players clicking, like if we do have the expectations that we have for like Spinks and Ihc and Hades to perform really well individually, then I think they can have a lot of upside. I don't know if they have tournament winning potential like say a G2, but I think just the consistency that I've seen from them so far, I feel pretty confident they're going to be a top 10 team probably. And I think, again, that's enough to be above everyone else in the division, or in this group, sorry. In terms of bottom teams, I feel pretty confident in that we can put some of the teams that are the bottom teams in here. I think for now, we can put these 3 in there, and then maybe we can look at some other ones. But first one, we have 9Z. The South American team. They have DGT, Max, Rox, Lucan, and David. Just not much talent here. Honestly, they just kind of qualified through a very weak region in the Americas. There's not a lot to say that positive here. I think they're just going to be completely and utterly outclassed by a lot of the other teams. Very little upset potential. There's just not a lot to love here. I think this is probably one of the bottom teams, if not the bottom team. The other 2 I have in that bottom tier is going to be IHC and Renegades. I think Renegades do have a little bit more upside, so they'll probably have them like at the top of this tier. I do think they have some upside. You can make a case that they're maybe up in a little bit higher of a tier, um, in like the tier above them a little bit, but it's tough to make the case. I just feel like they have not proven a consistent ability to win that much yet. I think if they spend a little more time in Europe, a little bit more time practicing and that kind of stuff, we're probably having a little bit different of a conversation, but I just haven't seen enough consistency or a high enough level from them yet to really think that they can make it to it like a top 8 stage at the major. Same for IHC. Again, they qualified through a very, very weak Asian region. This is probably one of the between IHC and 9Z, these are probably the two weakest teams. I think they're very likely to get beat up on pretty heavily. For that case, I'm going to put Renegades at the top of or the bottom of the B tier, just because I feel like the other two teams are probably on another tier of their own. So I think we're going to have a very, very stacked A and B tier, like a little bit of a middle section here. And this is going to be very interesting to see where a lot of these teams pan out. But I think this is relatively fair. And then we have probably these 5 teams talked about. We could kind of just go in order here. Astralis, I think they're going to be a top-ish team or in that A tier. I'm pretty excited for this team. They've looked pretty good as of late. I think there maybe is some rumor that sorry, I was just reading the timeline there. I thought maybe something had changed. I was reading some stuff maybe with Farley having problems, but or like leaving the team or something. I'm not sure, but for now, I'm just going to assume that this is the consistent roster and everything's looking normal for them. I feel like they've been looking a lot better lately. This team heavily relies on the bottom 3 players. I think we know Blame F and Farley have been performing really well lately. It's going to come down to whether we see those spike performances and see a lot of individuals steal out of config again. And we need some clutches and some upside performances from Zipex and Glaive. I think they're consistently good enough to get a pretty decent score here in this stage. They're, of course, a team very sound, very technically proficient. They're probably going to qualify. They're one of my teams that I would think has a very high chance to qualify. There are just some concerns with the like kind of upside and potential of this team, in my opinion. But I think very high chance to qualify, probably a top team here. I wouldn't have that much doubt in them, personally. Up next, we have Bad News Eagles. I'd definitely probably have them in this B tier. They've been like kind of a Cinderella story, if you will, as of late. Coming out of a pretty small region in Kosovo. I think that's... I don't know. I don't want to sound ignorant, but I think it's like a combination of regions similar to the UK, if I'm not mistaken. I'm not sure. Probably just stupid things I've said. But Center, GXX, Juan Flatro, Synopsy, and Rigon. Rigon is the leader, I believe. Nope, it says it's Synopsy. I thought Rigon was the leader. Apparently not. But I think they're kind of a Cinderella story team. I don't think a lot of people expected much. This team had a lot of kind of mixed pieces from lower regions, or lower teams. I did not expect them to get here. I don't think a lot of people did either. I don't think their skill level is quite up to the par. I think they're going to be one of the teams that are fighting for those like lower end spots when it comes to like trying to get into that top 8 to qualify. But I think ultimately they're probably going to come up a little bit short. Maybe we'll look at that and see when we kind of get a better understanding of the whole group. But for now, probably in that lower tier, they might have some upside and some potential to come up and win get up to that next level. But until then, I'm just not seeing it from them. I think they're probably going to be eliminated, but it's a possibility. Again, I'll probably throw them up probably in the top end of that B tier. They need to beat out 8 teams. They need to be in that top 8. So they only need to beat half of these teams. It'll be tough. Up next, Complexity, the American team, I guess, with JT, the South African. A little bit of an odd mixture, but I'm probably going to throw them in the top, I think the upper end of that B tier as well. It's a pretty tough ask for them. I think similarly, There's not a lot to break down here, really. I don't think it just depends. There's just a lot of question marks. We just don't know the individual level of these players, and how they're going to perform at this level. We've seen a lot of upside and potential from players like Floppy, Grim Jr., and Fang. I think JT is not expecting that much of. But it just comes down to how well these players play individually. There's a lot of question marks here. I'm excited to see them play. I do think they do have some serious upside. They have some serious potential to win some matches here and qualify maybe to that upper stage. I just wouldn't depend on it too much. There's just a lot of question marks. I'm excited to see this team play, but for now, I'm probably going to have them a little bit in the lower end. I just think some of the other teams that we have are going to be a little bit too strong for them. Eternal Fire. This was a pretty interesting one as well. This is a very tough team to get a read on, but I'm probably going to throw them up in this B tier as well. They're probably pretty close to these other teams, but I think overall, the Eternal Fire team, this Turkish team with the Turkish legend Zantaras, of course, backing up with Woxic, Calyx, Emor, and Xcloud, they've been stomping the other like kind of lower end teams pretty hard, so it's a little bit hard to get a gauge on them because I feel like they've been borderline playing much below where their competition, but at the same time that also kind of signifies that they are a much higher level team, so it's kind of hard to get a read. Again, this is a pretty similar team when it comes to how I would like rate or talk about complexity. I think they have a decent amount of individual talent with players like Xantaras, Woxic, Calyx. It just kind of comes down to what performance that we get from them, and I'm just not that sure. I think they do have some upside. Again, I think similar to how I described the past couple of teams, I do think if they were to qualify in the top 8 spot, I wouldn't necessarily be that shocked. I just wouldn't have them that likely to do so. That's all. I think they're pretty similar to the past couple teams that we've talked about with Bad News Eagles and Complexity, but I think they're probably right around that mark as well. Up next, Fours. I think this is a pretty strong team. I'm super excited for a lot of these players. I'm probably going to have them up in that A tier. They're probably one of my favorite teams to get that qualification in that top 8 point. Endgame leading them is Jerry, followed by Kenzie, Zorte, Norwee, and Shafley. Or Shalfie. I keep forgetting how his name is pronounced, but I believe it's Shalfie. They've had a lot of pretty strong individual performances as of late. I'm pretty excited for this team. I think this is kind of complexity, but with like a little bit more consistency, if you will. I like a lot of the things that this team has. I think they have a lot of talent, a lot of skill. I'm excited for them. I think they're going to be a pretty strong team. This is a team that I have high chances for to qualify to that top 16 marker. Winning the tournament upside, I don't think it's going to be there. There's just so many tough teams to compete with in that sense, but I think they're going to be a lot more consistent. They're a lot more technically sound. I think it's pretty similar to the other two teams that I just talked about in terms of like Eternal Fire and Complexity. I think they're pretty similarly skilled. However, I think this team has a little bit more leadership, a little bit more experience, a little bit more. They just have a little extra kind of they just have the little extra oomph that I think kind of separates them. I think they have a consistency level, and I think overall this is like a team where I'm pretty excited for them. I think they have a lot of upside, and I just like their ability to get the job done here. They're probably pretty likely to qualify, in my opinion. So yeah, I like them a good bit. Up next is Imperial. I'll put them somewhere around here in the B tier. This is another team that's pretty wide range of outcomes, in my opinion. They do have a lot of experience here with players like Fallen, Fur, FNX. These are major winning players. They just kind of on the back end of their career. We just don't know what we're gonna get. Like there is a certain level of kind of what's it called? There's a certain thing there as well, kind of something that's hard to put in words. There's a certain thing there, like a winning ability. Like you don't win majors without having it. Like that's something that Fallen for and FNX have done. we know individuals' talent from Bolts is pretty high. Vinny, we know his role is not that great as well, but this team is probably, it's tough because they just have not played that well. They have not played great players. The names are kind of a little deceiving here. I'm just not sure what to make of this team, honestly. This is probably one I'd like kind of just mark down as not having a lot of knowledge on. But overall, I think pretty decent team, probably pretty likely to qualify just because there's a lot of teams that I think could qualify. And they do have that little extra kind of unspoken ability to win with experience like Fallen for FNX Bolts. Like they have just kind of the ability to pull these wins out. That might be the difference maker. I think they probably qualify, but it's tough. There's a lot of teams I think in the same area here. I think after a little bit of retrospect, I'm just gonna move Renegades back down to C tier. It's kind of tough to have them on the same level of the rest of these teams. Next, MIBR. This is probably one in the lower end of B. Again, this is probably similar. I think, again, we're talking about these teams who are very, very similarly skilled. I wouldn't be surprised with a lot of these teams. So we've seen this team perform well as of late. They're just kind of really far up and down. Their highs are high, their lows are low. These people are, the MIBR is like a very... they're kind of like the landmark of the Brazilian teams. They have really high highs, really low lows. They rely heavily on individual talent. I just don't know how far that's going to take them. I just don't have a lot of hope in this team. I do think individually with players like Cello, I believe, and Yota, they have some individual talent to get there. I just don't know how consistent it is to rely upon. And we're going to need some big performances from players like Woody, specifically like on the op. I think they're going to need help to him to pick it up heavily for them to have any chance. I think this is going to be an okay team. Probably, again, one of those teams that are fighting for those spots that are definitely up for grabs, but it's going to be tough. Up next is Outsiders. They're probably pretty firmly in that A tier. I debated having them up in that S tier, but I think for their inconsistency's sake, mainly this relies heavily on Yakinder. This kind of inconsistently relies on pretty much everybody except for Jame, honestly. Maybe you could argue Flit's been fine, but Jame and Flit have kind of been the only two, I think, individuals stepping up as of late. We need to see some individual prowess from Buster and Kicker, and we need to see Yakinder return to form. Again, that's kind of with a little bit of a upside thing when it comes to them looking to like win the tournament, for example. I do think they have the ability. It's probably unlikely, but I think overall talent, they're probably the third best team, I think, here. Again, I debated having them in the S tier, but I think I'll probably just keep them in the top of A because we've seen some level of inconsistencies from them. Team Liquid. I actually have some pretty strong feelings about Team Liquid. They're probably going to be pretty unpopular, but I'm going to have them up in this A tier as well. That's probably not going to be unpopular, but I think this team has some serious upside and some serious potential. I love, obviously, a lot from what we see from Elige, Naf, and OC. We just need to see consistency from those three, and then we need to see some ability to hold their own, and we just need to see decent individual talent from Shox and Nitro, and I think they're going to be a pretty formidable team if all those things are true. Again, I think pretty strong team, ability to qualify pretty high. Again, I think that's true for all these S and A tier teams, but there's only so many spots. It's going to be tough. I think, again, they're pretty likely to qualify. I probably would have them, again, kind of around this A tier. It's just going to be tough. Like, they're going to be probably a little bit worse than these other teams ahead of them. You could argue like swapping Team Liquid and fours, but I personally like having Team Liquid at kind of at the bottom end of A here. I like the upside. I think they have a lot of high upside ability. We just have not seen that much from Shox and Nitro quite yet. Team Spirit. This is a pretty interesting one. I think this could go a lot of ways. I personally just have not seen enough from them quite yet. I'm going to put them at the top of B tier. I think they could arguably be at the bottom of A tier, but I think they just don't have that lethal bite to them quite yet. I think outside of Dexter and maybe you could argue Magix, we just haven't seen anything. I just don't think Patsy, Siren, and Chopper are quite good enough individually to hold their own and do their roles significantly well enough for them to consistently beat a lot of the other teams. I do think they do have a good level of consistency and skill to be a favorite, I think, against a lot of the other teams. I just wouldn't be surprised if they were to miss out the cut by a little bit. And we're going to be having a lot of these teams, I think, here fighting for these few spots. We'll talk about the group overall here in a little bit, but I think overall, we know Dexter, we know Magix are probably going to be very strong individual players. It just depends on the individual talent from Chopper, Patsy, and Siren. We need Patsy and Siren to step up if they're going to have a chance. The final team, Vitality, very interesting one to talk about. Again, I'll probably put them at this bottom of the A tier. I'm pretty strongly about this team. If you guys know kind of how I feel about Vitality, then you kind of know what I'm about to say, but I feel like they've been underperforming pretty heavily. I think the upside this team has is kind of kind of goes without saying. They obviously have the second best player in the world in ZywOo. Dupree's been looking pretty strong, but they need more from Apex, Masuta, and Magisk. There's no other way to mince it, especially Masuta and Magisk. They're not asking a lot for Masuta and Magisk, and they just have not been performing. They just need more individual talent from those two players. We know Apex's role. He's obviously a leader, so we don't expect a lot individually from him, but he actually does pretty well from his role. You just need more from Masuta and Magisk. That's all it comes down to. But I think overall, again, Dupree, Magisk, and Zonic, those three, obviously Zonic is a coach, but they have a certain quality to them as well. Obviously, multiple time major champions. And then you add a really great all-time player with like ZywOo. It just hasn't clicked for them. There isn't another way to mince it. It just has not clicked. They have not looked great. There's just a lot of problems that they've shown so far. But I think, again, that's still the talent and ability that they have is just too high, I think, for the rest of the group. So that's why I have them in that as the bottom of the A tier. If we're to break down and kind of look at how the whole group is going to play out, I think this is pretty fair. I don't think there's anything too crazy or outlandish here about this kind of tier list. I think you could realistically have an argument that ENCE is probably that could be an A tier. I think you could have an argument that Outsiders is up in S tier. I think G2 is probably the only team I feel super, super confident in terms of really putting the pedal to the metal and making the most out of this group. When I look at bottom teams, it's definitely between the other two. I think you could argue I'll throw Renegades back up here in B. I think there's definitely these bottom two. I think realistically you could even have G2 alone in S tier. This honestly kind of feels a little bit more right to me even, but it's just really hard to argue against how ENCE has been playing. So you know what? I'll throw it. I'll move ENCE back down to A. This is probably, this could be a little bit controversial, but this is honestly kind of how I view it. Again, I feel like G2 just has like serious tournament winning super upside. I feel confident. I just like G2 a lot. I feel like those bottom two teams are significantly worse than everyone else, and I kind of feel like it's really, really, really crammed in the middle there. I feel pretty confident in, of course, these other teams qualifying, but I think in my mind, this is kind of how I view these things. So obviously we have G2 and then 6 teams in these A tiers. That makes up 7 spots. We only have 8 teams that qualify. So we have a lot of these teams here fighting, in this B tier fighting to get that one qualification spot. I wouldn't be shocked if we see some A tier teams fall down. Like probably I wouldn't be shocked if Team Liquid, Vitality, or Fours fall down. It's just tough to consistently see those teams lose. I think this is probably the order. I think you could mix and match. Maybe I think you could order B maybe a little bit differently. It's just tough. There's a lot of teams fighting for a few spots, and we're gonna see some things happen for sure. There's no other way to put it. But overall, I'm pretty happy with kind of how we talked about these teams and my expectations so far are going forward. I'm super excited to see the second stage. Obviously, we get to see the introduction of all these super, super elite teams like Na'Vi, Heroic, for example. I think Na'Vi, Heroic, Cloud9, G2. I think these are probably the the top teams, in my opinion, to win the whole thing. So I'm excited. I think this is going to be super exciting stuff. We're going to have videos coming out. I don't know what kind of slates they're doing because we do have very odd things. We have 8 best of ones on day 1, all at different times. Jeez, excuse me. Excuse me, but yeah, I'm not sure, but Bad News Eagles, Eternal Fire, pretty close. I expect Eternal Fire to win this one. I'm honestly a little bit surprised the odds are this close. I thought Eternal Fire was definitely a better team, but it's hard to deny the magic in the recent results of Bad News Eagles. Vitality Complexity makes sense. I'm kind of surprised Vitality's this much of a favor, honestly. I kind of feel like the value is definitely on Complexity there. G2 Liquid makes sense. I think this is fair. I don't want to give too much of a take there. 4's Renegades, again, makes sense. Price is a little heavy, but I'm not loving the either side. Astralis IHC, again, fair. I think Astralis big favorite. Imperial Team Spirit. I'm honestly kind of surprised Imperial is a favorite there. I definitely do not agree with that. I think Team Spirit is the better team. It's tough. I like Team Spirit here. They're probably one of my favorite underdogs so far. Ents 9Z, again, not much to say. I think Ents much better team. MRB are outsiders. I think this is fair as well. Not a lot to love in terms of odds or anything. I think Spirit and Eternal Fire make sense. I think those are both fair and bettable lines. But yeah, I think that's going to be it. Talking about the future and talking about this group. Again, I will make videos when we do have the slates announced, and we can talk about the individual slates and how all these things are looking individually. So look forward to that. But hopefully you guys managed to get an idea of what I'm looking at, and hopefully you guys are excited and in super anticipation of this major championship. That'll be it from me, and I will see you guys when we get some DK information.